All right, welcome to our first class on spiritual warfare. Today we're going to be discussing the combatants. Whenever there's a war, you figure there's a battleground and you figure there's various persons or things in combat against one another. So our first task is to figure out who the combatants, who the players are. You know from church that the devil or the demons are the ones with whom we're in conflict. And you probably know also that demons are supposed to be fallen angels. So to really understand the nature of the demonic, we need to first understand the nature of the angelic. Then add the concept of a fallen angel, and we'll know exactly what we're dealing with. And so that's where we're going to begin. What is an angel? And then we'll work from that to a fallen angel and understand who our enemy really is. So to figure out what angels are, it's useful to sort of set up a taxonomy of everything there is and then figure out where the angels fit in. And what we're ultimately going to try to do is understand the difference between angels and God on the one hand and angels and us on the other hand. But let's just sketch it out, starting with the lowest of all things, which of course are rocks. The non-living, right? I'll put NL for the non-living. And we'll make a line, and everything up here we'll call those the living things. All right? Now, of the living things, what's the lowest possible order? Plants, trees, broccoli, for those who just don't understand broccoli. All right? We'll make a special category. All right, and then above plants, things that move around, have experience, what would we call the next group? Yep, our animal friends. All right, then next up the chain. Right, exactly, human beings. All right, and then let's just jump to the top. So, because we know who's at the top of the whole chart, right? God, yeah? All right, and let's try to contrast these. Plants, animals, and human beings all have something in common. What is it? So do rocks. Good point. You're right, we're all created, and we're all different from God based on that, right? What else do these have in common that we don't find with the rocks? Souls. Depends on your definition of soul, whether plants have souls. Okay, in Aristotle, yes. But these things here are all correct, physical and alive. Whereas our rocks, friends down here, they're physical, but they're not living, right? And the reason this is important is God, physical or not physical? Not physical. So we call him not physical or immaterial. In philosophy, it's not material, hence immaterial. And in religion, you'll hear it sometimes, the theological word for this is a spirit. To be a spirit just means you don't have a body. Okay? Now, how big is God? Okay, so let's add that in there. And we would agree that all the things down here are finite so far? Yeah? Okay. Now, human beings are physical, but there's something else going on in us that we don't find in our animal friends. What else do we have? Exactly. There's something immortal about us, something spiritual. Okay, now, are the spiritual elements of us infinite or finite? Can you think things into being? Let's try. Everybody focus on this chair. Let's turn it into something modest, a raccoon. Use the force, Luke. Somebody's not thinking hard enough with the lack of faith, right? No, we don't have this power, right? Crazy. We don't have infinite power. We can't turn chairs into raccoons. So we know that we are finite. Human beings, thus, are composed of two kinds of stuff. The spiritual stuff and the physical stuff. And of course, it's not infinite. All right, notice that human beings are both, yeah?
Are all spirits, though, eternal?
It depends what you mean by eternal. Immortal, yes.
Okay.
From what we can tell. Real quick, physical things die because there's parts. If you take enough parts away, you're dead. Okay? Spirits, being immaterial, aren't composed of parts. Thus, once a spirit is made, it's a simple thing, and there's nothing about it that dies. However, the only reason anything is in existence It is because God is sustaining all things in existence at all times by his omnipotent power. So it could be that God could create a spirit and then pull out from under it his power, and then it would be annihilated. However, we have no evidence that God ever annihilates anything. So, given that, yes, they're immortal. But the word eternality is a little tricky because that tends to think you never had a beginning and only God is eternal. Good question. All right, now what you're going to realize is there's a group space in here, right? What is possible in the middle here? Oh, yeah, that's absolutely right. But what is their nature? What we're trying to do is understand what angels are. So using our taxonomy, what would we classify them? So I would go ahead and write the angels in there. Yep. And then are they material or immaterial? They're immaterial. They're not physical. And do they have, and if you're immaterial, you're a spirit, right? So what's the difference between an angel and God? What was that?
Finite.
Exactly, finitude. Not infinite. All right, and there is the nature of the angel. All right. Now, notice human beings down here, composites of spirit and matter, we are not angels trapped in bodies. The Scientologists say that's what we are. They say you are a spiritual being. That's what you are at your core. We do not say that. We say you are a human being. And to be human is to be composed of two kinds of stuff. Physical stuff and spiritual stuff. That free, independent thinking will, right? But our spiritual stuff is fitted for body. It's designed to be that which informs the body and makes it function and move. And so we add a word to describe that special functioning. And it came up earlier. Jonathan, what was that term you used much earlier? Soul. So, human beings have a soul, but it's not different from our spirit. It is the kind of spirit that we have. All right? Our spirits are fitted for souls. If you were separated from your body, this is not good. You'd be thinking, where are my arms? Right? How am I going to eat soup? Angels do not have this problem because angels are never fitted for bodies at all. It follows that angels do not have souls. Okay? Fundamental different thing. When Jesus came in the incarnation, notice how the church emphasizes he had a human soul. So the divine eternal person was fitted for human nature, such that, just like us, he's attached to his body in a complete way. We do not possess our bodies. They're ours, but not by rule and control. When you've heard of demon possession, when demons possess bodies, that's an invasion to something that does not belong to them. You belong to your body. Jesus belonged to his body. When the incarnation happened, this was not a possession. It was incarnation. So keep that in mind, that difference. So we're not spirits. We're not angels trapped in bodies. We were never angels. We are not angels now. And we will never be angels. And how do we know that? At the end of our creed, what do we talk about? Even if we die and are separated from our body for a little while, what happens at the end of all time? Resurrection of the body. Good news. Soup is still possible, right? And remember, Jesus told his disciples, when I go away, I'm going to make rooms for you. Rooms in heaven. What do you need rooms for if you're a spirit? You wouldn't need it. Rooms are for people that have stuff. You know, so you hang your clothes, put your boots somewhere. That's rooms. So, human beings are always this essential spirit physical composite. We are essentially, as C.S. Lewis called us, hybrids. Okay? Not true for the angels. The angels are different in kind. So what are they? Well, they don't essentially have wings. You say, but I know I've heard about wings in church. That's true. When angels appear to us, they can manifest in a body, either by way of a vision, by making it seem like they have a body, it's in your mind a vision, or they can put on a very, very cleverly designed human suit the best you can get, so you can't tell if they want to trick you. All right? And they could appear as a normal person. But they could also appear in the air with glory and wingedness, because angels are of the spirit of the air, and the wing symbolizes that for us. So they don't essentially have wings. They're not toddlers. You know the little cherubs you see in the calendars? There are no baby angels. There's no toddlers. They're not physical. They don't marry. They don't mate. They don't have children. You say, well, then what in the world are these things? They are absolutely huge, ancient minds. That's what a spirit is. A spirit is pure mind. They were created before the material world was even made. That's how ancient they are. They were created, but they don't die, and they don't reproduce. In the Old Testament, you'll sometimes hear them called the gods. Small g, right? Because a god, in the small g sense, not necessarily being to be worshipped, although people get confused historically, right? Our pagan friends, very confused. But to be a god is just to be a being of spirit. The God, the true God, the eternal God, big G, he's the infinite spirit. You see the connection? But even in the Old Testament, the angels sometimes are called the gods. In Chronicles at one point, God calls a council of the gods together, and the angels gather. Right? And of course, you can see how the ancient pagans worshipped many of these beings, and they were probably angels or their fallen comrades. Notice that angels also have no species. If you have dog, the species, no, dog is not a species, right? What's the thing? German Shepherd, is that a species? Where's my scientist? Yeah? Okay, so German Shepherd, species. And because you have this class, it's then instantiated through a lot of different examples, right? Rex, right? He's a German Shepherd. And then Tom, that's probably a cat name, but that's a German Shepherd. Human beings, we have all of us, right? One nature that's common, that's our species, and then a whole bunch of manifestations of this one thing. Therefore, we're all equal. We're all human beings. All the German Shepherds are German Shepherds. Our differences are very minute, right? Extremely small differences. Every single angel is a species unto himself. It's not a concept that's put through physicality, and thus you get lots of instances. It follows that the angels, unlike us being essentially equal, they are essentially unequal. And thus the angels exist in a pure hierarchy of power, from the lowest all the way up to the highest, which is why we use the terminology of an army to try to capture what they are. A pure hierarchy. Our nature, equality. Their nature, fundamental inequality. And that ends up having significance at various points, as we'll see as we go along. How do angels operate? They might like to communicate with one another, but you say they don't have a body, so how are they supposed to talk? Good question. So how would they do that? How would an angel talk to an angel?
Telepathy.
Correct, telepathy. Mind to mind, direct, instant contact. Think about that. Telepathy is an angelic power. It does not belong, nor is it fitting for human beings. You're like, ooh, that kind of messes up some science fiction. Could be. If an angel wants to move an object, how does he do it? If I want to move this pen, I just move it around using this nice arm. Right? I can throw it in the air. Amazing. Look at that. But could an angel do that if he wanted? Could he concentrate on this pen, take it out of my hand, and move it around? Yep. Would he have a big arm? So by what power do they move objects if they wish to? What was that?
Like a thought.
Right, exactly. Direct thought on the object, and this is called telekinesis. Telekinesis is an angelic power, not fitting for human beings. Our mode of moving and maneuvering objects is through this wonderful system known as the human body. And we can move pens, and it's very impressive. Okay, don't ever be impressed by some demonic manifestation of power where you see something floating through the air. Watch this. You impressed? No. Okay, don't be alarmed. It's weird if we're ever to happen, you see something like this. But don't be impressed. I mean, give me a break, right? So notice, though, these modes mean that angels operate on the mental level. And that makes sense because they are great minds. Okay, everyone understand that? All right, so that's what angels are by category. This is the space. But do they exist? That's a different question, right? How do we know they exist? Well, the first thing is angels are obviously possible because we can hypothesize and understand what they would be. Right? If you can understand that something has a coherent concept, like an elf, yep, that's possible. There may not be any elves, but I know what an elf would be if I were to find one. So they're possible. Also, interestingly, angels are likely. It's probable that they exist. You might be, well, how would you know that? Well, are there lots of rocks? Are there lots of plants? Meaningless. Lots of him just means he's big, right? Every category is filled. Wouldn't it be weird if this category had nothing in it? God seems to like to fill categories with lots and lots of examples. So it would be weird if this were empty, meaning it's likely that angels exist. But ultimately, we can't prove with a proof that angels exist like we can with God, or we can look at ourselves and know that we exist. Ultimately, the only way we would know for sure angels exist is if we met one. And here's what's interesting. Our history is filled with human encounters with angels. And not just within the biblical tradition. In Etruscan, Roman, and Persian art, there are beings that look very much like our biblical angels. And we know from the ancient myths that there's concourse between gods and men that is prolific. Maybe we can't tell whether this or that myth is actually correct, but the idea that the gods are communicating to man, that seems incontestable. And of course, in the Hebrew Bible, do we not find angels from start to finish? Angels are showing up left and right, aren't they? And then in the New Testament, what's the most important of all and significant angelic contact throughout all of human history? What's it called? Speak. The Annunciation, right? That's it. I mean, what could be bigger than that? There's Gabriel. You imagine if Mary said, well, I really don't believe angels exist. Gabriel's like, you're ruining the whole show. Rewind the tape, restart. Right? And Jesus, his life is surrounded and filled with angels. And of course, he specifically talks about them being real beings. Remember Pontius Pilate, and he says, I could call 6 legions of angels right now if I wanted to. Pilate's like, 6 legions? Let's see, how many legions do I have command of? Don't worry, that's not the kind of kingdom I'm running. 6 legions of angels. Jesus probably isn't bluffing, right? Jesus seemed to think angels were real. Well, he would know. So, we seem to have a lot of historical evidence of interaction with angels. But nowadays, we also have contact now and then with the angelic, but it's under a brand new name. People, of course, don't like to talk about angels and demons. They like to pretend that's just witchcraft and nonsense. So what they've done, though, is put it under an entirely new category, the paranormal. Right? And granted, there may be things about the paranormal that you find rather dubious. But there's an awful lot of strange things that happen. And within that realm of strange things, some of it fits very well-defined patterns. And some of the beings that seem to be encountered then in those areas are demons and angels. So it's not like the angelic has disappeared. But we have to remember, because angels don't have bodies, it's impossible to get a carcass and dissect it. Right? Our biochemistry people, they'll be like, give me a dead one, I can look at it, aha, angelic feather. All right, they're real. Not possible, because angels aren't those kinds of beings. Right? So you're never going to have data of the empirical sort that gives you a study of a carcass. There is no anatomy of an angel. That's not the kind of evidence we have to work with. All right, so we know now what angels are, and we also understand that they exist. So now let's talk about the fallen angel. And it's also important to note that when we use the term angel, in broad scopes, they're all angels, angels and demons, because that's what their nature is. However, because of the fall of the angels, the bad ones, in church, we now call the fallen ones demons. So normally when Father Vince starts talking about angels, he's not meaning to include the demons in the category. Okay? But when we're talking now by angels, we mean the whole category, whether you're a good or bad one. Just like human beings, there's good ones and there's bad ones. Everyone got that? Yeah? Okay. Any other questions about this structure before I erase it? All right. Let's move on then to how these beings fell and the nature of their morality. Angels are persons. To be a person doesn't mean you necessarily have a body. When we use the word people, we tend to think of people as embodied persons. So we don't normally call angels people. But to be a person just means you have what? What makes you a person as opposed to not?
A mind.
Correct. And you say, oh, well, that's what we just talked about. Correct. Like there are how many persons in the Godhead? 3 persons. Okay, if you're a person, it follows if you have a mind, same thing, that you're a rational being capable of making choices. So we call you an agent, someone capable of acting. And to act, it means that you are not caused, but you're choosing. Hence, you are a being with will. The freedom to choose. All persons are therefore moral beings. They have the capacity to choose between good and evil. Hence, because angels are persons, it follows they do or did have the capacity to choose between good and evil. Yes?
Sorry to go back. Saint Michael the Archangel. So a saint, archangel.
Not a saint that was elevated from us. The angels who chose wisely and didn't fall, they then had the vision of God given to them. And so insofar as when we see God, we're now saints, right? The angels would be the same thing. But it doesn't follow that Michael was a guy who, like us, who then went to heaven, got his wings, and then got sainted. Okay? We use the word saint on both kinds of beings because of the vision of God. All right, so they would have free will, just like we do. So how do the angels choose? Well, this is what gets tricky. See, when human beings choose, we being in physical form, we choose, but then we kind of choose the other way. And then we go this way. And then we're like, well, maybe I'll go this way. Right? Our choices are spread out in time. Our choices are spread out through our bodies. So when we talk about human choice, what we're really talking about is that choice that sticks. What we call human character. Who you really are. Who you are when you don't have time to think and you just respond. Then we see what your measure is, yeah? And that character is the result of all those little free choices that are slowly building up, right? And that's why, for human beings, we emphasize good moral habits, which of course we call virtues, and we try to avoid bad moral habits, which of course we call vices. Habit is the core of human morality. Angels have no habits. Angels have no bodies. There's nothing held back when an angel acts. When an angel acts, he acts with all of himself completely. There are no takebacks. There is accordingly no redemption possible for an angel, because there's nothing left that could have gone the other direction. That's why we don't pray for the demons. Oh Lord, save them. You notice in church, you pray for everything and everybody else, but not the demons. Why? Is it a lack of compassion? No. It's not a lack of compassion. It's that they've made their choice. That's it, game over. So for an angel, he makes the entirety of his choice for or against God in one massive decision. And that choice, from what we can tell, occurred a long time ago. You say, well, how did that work? Well, the scriptures tell us that the demons fell because of 2 sins, envy and pride. And from the Jewish tradition, we get a story that helps us understand how that might have gone down. So let's think about how this might have worked. So one day, God's, with all the angels, and at this point, there's no fallen or unfallen angels. They're all just innocent beings who haven't made any moral choices at all. He said, all right, I've got this great idea. And they're like, all right, let's hear it. What are you going to do? Well, you know how I've begun to create this world, and we've got rocks, and we've got plants, and we've got fish, and all these cool things? Yeah, they're really cool. Well, I was thinking, what about if I took one of these types of things, and I breathed into it spirit, and I created a hybrid being, a creature who's composed of both kinds of stuff. Wouldn't that be really cool? And 1/3 of the angels were like, whoa, wait a minute. You're going to take our pure spiritual stuff, and you're going to insert it into mud and blood and intestines? It doesn't sound right. Does not sound right. And 2/3 of the angels are like, whoa, that takes the cake. We thought these other things were cool. We thought we were cool. The idea you're going to merge the two together, right? See where this is going? Then there's a Christian story on top of the Jewish one. Then God said, oh, and by the way, I'm going to become one of them. And at that point, the 1/3 said, that's it, clearly lost his mind. How can God, infinite and glorious, contaminate himself with the muck of the world and become born of a woman? This is beyond undignified. We must save God from himself. And so Lucifer, one of their number, one of their greatest, most powerful ones, said, we must save God from himself. I will rise to the Most High and take over. And of course, bam, that led to the war in heaven. Right? That led to the war in heaven. Now think about that. The angels, the demons who fell, resented the idea that God would make a creature that is composed in part of their stuff. And they hate us because of it. They resent us. You remember the question we always, remember after 9/11 we all asked, why do they hate us? Like, where did this come from? Well, it's a question from the demons. For the demons too, right? Why do they hate us so much? They hate us because they think we are a fundamental half-breed in dignity. That we should not exist. And they want to show God the stupidity of having made creatures like us. And that's their objective. To show that we never should have been made and that they were right all along. So when we choose not to be human and go into all the destruction of ourselves, they're like, is not this what we told you? Right? You can see from human history that we're not doing very well, are we? Kind of making the case against ourselves, right? Well, that is how the spiritual struggle begins. The other 1/3 of the angels, the 2/3 of the angels, were thankful and grateful for the amazing, astounding creativity of God's act. And one of their number, whose name is very interesting, Michael, which names means who is like unto God, answered Lucifer's challenge. Lucifer says, I shall become like the Most High. Instantly, St. Michael is activated because he's a mind and he has a certain area of responsibility. His area of responsibility is, who is like unto God? Captain of the Royal Guard, that's how we would put it, right? And he takes the other 2/3 of the angels and bam, takes them on. You say, well, what kind of battle would that be? A battle of mind to mind. We don't really know. I mean, all of our wars are physical, right? And in our science fiction, we have some people who have tried to imagine what it's like to invade other people's minds, and they're horror stories types of science fiction. Horrible. So we don't want to be involved with telepathic engagement. But it must have been horrifying. And then 1/3, those 1/3 that rebelled were defeated and thrown out of heaven into the material universe, which means we get to deal with them. You say, well, that doesn't seem entirely fair. Fairness has nothing to do with it. Never think that God cares a whit about fairness. God makes things different. And at every level of difference, you're responsible for your area. Is it fair, remember my chart, that God made rocks that are beneath vegetables? and the vegetables use the rocks for their life. Is that fair? Is it fair that God made animals that consume the vegetables? He meant the vegetables saying, wait a minute, what did we do? Is it fair that we eat everything? Then is it fair that God created a being above us that has tremendous power, bigger than us? You say, well, I don't like the sound of that. Your feelings are not relevant. Okay? You might have thought that we are the top of the food chain. You are not the top of the food chain. Nevertheless, here's what's weird. If the angels are as powerful as we're making out, and the demons basically moved into the material universe, you might wonder why they don't just wipe us out if they hate us so much. Well, think about their objective. What was their objective?
Show them the wrong idea to make us hybrid.
Right, and the only way to do that is for us to do what? Sin. Notice, we're the battleground because we're the only free moral agents left. The plants and the animals and the rocks, they don't have free wills. They're not relevant to this debate. God is holy, eternal God, so obviously he's not going to fall. The angels have all made their choices. The only thing that's left that we're aware of is us. So in spiritual warfare, who is the battleground? We are. So think about that. We are the battleground. Now, let's notice two extraordinary things about the demonic fall. First of all, the demons hate our race. It follows that racism, hating people for their differences of shape, skin pigmentation, all these sorts of things, is demonic. Okay, we are one human being race. There's one human race, isn't there? People in the past used to act like because your head is a little bit different shaped or your skin's a slightly different pigmentation, that somehow you're a different race. Of course, we all know biologically this is ludicrous. And still, we have people who hate each other over race, color, shape. The demons think this is the greatest thing. They already hate us. And when they get us to agree with them that we suck, they're like, these people are such idiots. And we are ridiculously gullible to this. Why in the world would we agree with them that our nature is to be despised? Why would we agree with them that a slight variation in skin pigmentation means that you're somehow better or worse than someone else? Why would we ever fall for that? And yet, we do. But when we do that, what we're actually doing is agreeing with them that human nature is not worth it. So we should not despise one another. We should recognize that we're all human beings. And that is our common core. But that's not the only thing the demons were the first of. You can probably see the next one. Haters of women. Misogynists. Why do demons hate women? What?
Given the creative power.
Yes. And it's very messy.
Say that again.
Creative power. You bear young from your bodies. Remember, the demons hate the body. They think it's disgusting and beneath them. And the idea that pure spirit is put into human flesh and held within the womb and grown and developed in this astonishing way that we talk about, and then born into the world, the demons are disgusted and repulsed by this. And they hate women for having the audacity to bring these, to their mind, half-breed hybrids into the world. So they despise you. And notice, who do they despise most of all? Who is the one woman they hate the most? And why? Why do they hate Mary the most?
She brought Jesus into the world.
Yeah. The ultimate, infinite spirit, God himself coming into the flesh. And boy, do they hate her. So you know the invective you get against Mary? You sometimes hear about it in the world. Even like our Protestant friends. And I was a Protestant way back in the day. And I remember, man, we hated Mary. We told ourselves we did. But the truth is, we were taught to hate her. And now I think back on it. So shameful. But there's a lot of people that have it in for her. And you'd be like, why? She's such an amazing human being, an incredible mother. Absolutely. So once again, why would we join the demonic in hating women? Right? Think about that. Men, think about this. Do not use the powers that you have, which are usually greater than your wife physically, to hurt and coerce and do harm to your wife. Those powers were given for your wife's protection, for her nurture and care. Don't join the demons in assaulting half of us. Do you see how these two things are all about hating human nature? They started it. We should not be so stupid to fall for this. Realize it's just a trick. Reject it. How am I doing on time? Oh, good. All right, so what follows from this? Here's what follows from this. We need to wake up to this reality. Ready? We are at war. We are at war. But it is not the war of human beings versus human beings. This is the war that we have been at since the beginning when we first arrived on this planet. And that is these demons who hate us and want to do everything in their power to convince us to fall. They can't force us to fall because if they force us, it's not free will. The name of the game is to persuade us to fall, to persuade us to sin, to use this incredible free gift of free will that God gave us and damage our own natures by worshiping them instead of the loving God. That's the name of the game. And therefore, their greatest weapon against us is what? Temptation. So, we need to talk about the nature of this spiritual war. How do they tempt us? Well, it's very interesting because it all comes down to our natures again. So let's look at human nature again and understand the structure of demonic attack. And then the next two classes, we'll talk about demonic strategy 1 and demonic strategy 2. So human nature consists of a spiritual part and a material part, a physical part, linked together by the soul. All right? That's what we are. The demonic objective is to get us to push one side over against the other in order to damage the whole. So, on our physical side, that is our animal side, right? They might try to persuade us to be excessively animalistic, right? And of course, we have a word for this. It's called hedonism. And what is hedonism? The pursuit of pleasure and selfishness. You familiar with this tactic? You're like, oh boy, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So the demons would like us to act like nothing but animals, just giving into every desire without any thought for whether it's any good for us. And then they laugh it up. Look at these human beings, these lofty spiritual creatures acting like cattle. Bunch of jerks. Never should have been made. We were given free will. We were given rationality to ask, yeah, but is this good for me? We should be using that, right? But on the other side, you could go the other way. Because there's some people that, oh, no, I'm too good for that. I'm too holy for such things. And they reject the animal and go the other direction and try to become purely spiritual. Read spiritual as spiritist, not spiritual in the good sense. You know how we use the word spiritual in two ways? This is known as Gnosticism. It's an ancient church heresy that remains very much with us. Do you remember the Pharisees? Constantly separating themselves from other people because they were too good for them. I don't touch this, that's unclean. Right? You know the people that are too holy for sex? Oh, or too holy to drink alcohol. Right? You know what I mean? Anything that smacks of pleasure, they're like, oh, sorry. I'm repulsed by such things. I'm above it. Well, wait a minute. I thought we were human. You said, well, we shouldn't be drunk, habitual drunks. Correct. Does it follow you should never drink? Well, no. So what were our ancestors doing with the Prohibition Amendment exactly? Okay, yeah, that's weird. That's weird. Okay? These are the people who think they're very spiritual, religious, the self-righteous. Notice, either one of these things can damn us because the human being is the composite of both properly ordered to the good. An order that we call what? Virtue. Remember, virtue is the midpoint between being excessive and deficient in any area. Right? So if you have too much fear and it runs your life, excessive fear, we say you're a what? Coward. You're a coward. You have the vice of cowardice. Too much. But on the other hand, what if you go the other way? And you have no fear at all where you should. You just rush into things like a bull in a china shop. Brash. Too little. The virtue is called courage. Notice courage is not the absence of fear, is it? Courage is the control of yourself while you're afraid to still do the right thing. Okay? Notice that structure. The virtue is the midpoint between excess and deficiency. You understand? Now, look at this. We have that same structure here. The hedonism is all about what? Excess. The Gnostics are all about what? Deficiency. And their entire religion's built on Gnosticism. You know these ones that think that your humanity is the problem? If you can just pull away from your humanity, separate yourself from it, meditate out of it, set up all these rules that circumscribe the body and keep you away, that somehow the problem is being physical. The problem with human beings is not being physical. The problems with human beings is that we don't love each other. That's the problem. Sin, right? It's not what we are, it's what we do. So these people get confused and think they want to simply become pure spirits away from the body. Well, that's to become an angel, isn't it? Can human beings become angels? No, there is no nature hopping. You can't change your nature. It's impossible. Don't fall for the error of the Little Mermaid. If only I could be a girl and have legs, the world would be a great place. And to become a girl, what did she do? She sacrificed the entire undersea kingdom and got her father, the king, locked up. I don't think Disney got this right. She should have been thankful that she was a mermaid, shouldn't she? And found some very fine mermen, which presumably, I remember the movie, there were some swimming around. We should be thankful for what we are, not try to be something we're not. You understand the point? Don't be like the demons. But see, that's what they want. If they can direct us to worship their nature, see, worship angelic nature, who are we really worshiping? Them. And you have whole religions, like, again, I'll use Scientology as an example. Their whole objective is to become pure spirits. They think they were pure spirits 1 billion years ago, and they think this body is just a temporary arrangement, and then they're going to go on and continue on as pure spirits. And look at the way that this dements their lives. Right? Human family, these things just don't matter. Well, if you're a physical being and a spiritual being, then human family matters, doesn't it? Yes. So we avoid the excess, but we also avoid the deficiency because the virtue is our goal. So notice what this means. This means that the entire demonic attack strategy is going to become an attempt to motivate you to pursue hedonism, excesses that are damaging to your human structure, to your spouse, to your family, to your state, to your church, to your job, or to push you the other direction, toward becoming so spiritual, spiritist, that you have no time for your physical duties, for your civic obligations, for your family. Like, I'm sorry, I have to go pray. I can't possibly wash the dishes. Really? Right? You know how people use religion as an excuse not to love other people? The goal is to push us in one direction or the other. But our defense is human virtue, because that is our completeness. So this week we've talked about the combatants. Next 2 weeks we're going to talk about the two main lines of demonic attack. Next week, demonic attack on our minds and our knowledge. And we're going to see this structure. So remember this structure. We're going to see it again and again and again. Third week, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing demonic attack strategy number 2, their attack on our nature and our morals. But lest you get nervous and worry that we're going to be defeated, week number 4, the divine counterattack. How we can fight them and win. So that's going to be good. All right, see you next week.